I had a knock on my door, and when I opened it, there was a stranger with a gift card to a local garden store for me. Apparently her kid had been pinching tulips from my garden every day to give to his mom, and they wanted to pay for them, once they figured out whose garden they were coming from. I had thought squirrels were doing it, and had regretted planting them the year before, not being able to enjoy them. I spent the gift card on more bulbs. When I was 16, I'd taken my mom's old Pontiac Bonneville to the movies, and I was in such a hurry that I forgot to turn off the lights. When I came out, the car was dead, but someone left a set of jumper cables on the hood with a note that said, "I hope you make it home safely." I've never ever forgotten about that. Since then I've tried to pay that kindness forward any way I can. Edit. Thank all of you for the awards. I was about 20 miles from home, and this was before cell phones were affordable, so that person saved me that night. For those asking, I'm assuming the person came out, and saw my lights on, and maybe even saw them running low/flickering, and knew there was a possibility they would burn out before I made it back to my mom's car. Even if my battery hadn't died, it was a nice gesture. I was in London and was supposed to be flying home that day. Walking down the street with my 2 suitcases towards the tube station, nice and early, on my way to Heathrow, with plenty of time. Silly me didn't realize that when the sign said there is going to be a tube strike on the day you fly home, that means the tube is completely closed. I thought it just meant delays or something. I don't know. I start walking toward the bus station a few blocks away, desperately trying to come up with a plan B. A young man comes up to me and offers to help carry my suitcases. He asks where I'm going, and I say Heathrow, which is an hour away at this point, and time until my flight is running short. It starts raining. He says you'll never make it there on time on the buses. He calls me a cab, then finds a little awning where we can sit and wait for the cab and stay out of the rain. He lets me use his phone to transfer money to pay for the cab. Mine didn't have service outside my home country. We just sat and chatted for 30 minutes waiting for this cab, and he made me feel so much less panicked. I just couldn't believe the kindness he showed to some random person on the street, and I've never been able to find him again online to thank him. When I was 18, I had a friend in the hospital with brain cancer. His time was limited. I visited him when I could. He was kind of hippie alternative punk. I wore a leather jacket and had long hair. I walked to his room, a nurse saw me. Without saying a word, she walked to me and gave me a long, comforting hug. That's how I knew he passed. I had just lost my job and my dad had his card stolen. He was waiting on the bank, but completely out of food, and living in an old, run-down RV. I would have figured something out. I'd die before I let him starve. Right as he's almost in tears talking to me about it, someone knocked on the door. A lady had food for someone in an RV, but those people had vacated the parking lot, and she wanted to know if my dad needed any. Some sort of local helping hands org. There was everything from canned goods to fresh meat, milk, pasta. Everything. She had bought it with her own money and didn't want it to go to waste. I'll never forget the timing or her generosity. I was going to a Starbucks to eat with a friend I met days ago. Suddenly a stranger about my age asked me how to go to that exact same place, so I told him that I was going there too, and we started a conversation while walking. When we got to the Starbucks, we sat on different tables, and I waited for my friend. He didn't appear, because he had had some problems and finally he couldn't go. I asked the stanger if I could eat with him, and he accepted. Now we are friends and we sometimes talk through our mobiles. Edit. Grammar. Nope, English isn't my first language, but I'm still learning. On my honeymoon in Greece, we nearly got stranded driving our little scooter back from a day trip. finally found a petrol station in this village, but it was during afternoon nap/siesta time. We apologized as best we could in the little Greek we knew. The guy obliged but looked a little annoyed. He casually asks where we are from and we tell him New Zealand. His face lights up and is amazed because he had never met someone from NZ before. He asks us what are we doing so far away from home. We tell him that it's our honeymoon. He tells us to wait there and comes back with a bottle of wine that's obviously worth more than the €6 of petrol we are buying. He refuses for us to round up the bill or for us to buy anything. He just tells us honeymoon is honeymoon, be happy, go. Hands down one of the best highlights of our trip.
Oh.
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon just came out in theaters. I had been planning to go see it on my next day off. I didn't have a car so relied on the bus. The day of the movie came and there was a snowstorm. I walked downtown to get the bus, but there was a sign saying all buses canceled due to snow. I was super bummed out and walked over to the local coffee shop. I ordered a coffee and was telling the owner how disappointed I was that I couldn't get to the movies. There was an older woman sitting in the shop, and she overheard us. She looked at me and said, I really want to see that movie too. Let's go, I'll drive. So that the day me and a perfect stranger went out to lunch, and to see a movie together. About a year later I started seeing this guy in town, and his downstairs neighbor was the lady who took me to the movies all those months earlier. We had stopped by her house for her to get a sweater before the movies. I told the guy me and your neighbor went to see Crouching Tiger together. He was like, that was you? She went on and on about how cool it was to go to the movies. My last job was working for the TSA. It was a pretty miserable job and most people didn't like you. I was just having a horrible day filled with personal issues and work issues, and this nice older lady asked if I was okay. I had the standard, yeah, I'm doing fine. And she asked if I could use a hug. I had a blank stare for a second, and then just hugged her. Probably the nicest thing anyone ever did for me when I worked for there. The world needs more people like her. Red heart. I'm a wheelchair user. At a baseball game, a little girl came running up to me and climbed onto my lap. Her mom was apologetic, but I told her it was fine. No worries. Looking at the girl's face, I could tell she had some kind of developmental disability. Mom explained to me that the little girl's grandfather used a wheelchair, and she missed him. I rolled around a little to give her a ride. She giggled and had a good time, then she climbed off and went back to her mom. I guess this can be perceived as pathetic by some people, and that's okay, but I used to go to school with a bunch of horrible people. I'm disabled, so I look and walk weird. Every time I'd go out for lunch to my favorite food place and see them, they'd hurl insults. Anyway, I was standing in a long queue, and they were behind me. There was an old lady, maybe like 70 to 80, behind them. They were making fun of my walk. I sorta can't walk straight. I had a stroke as a kid, and this old lady called them a bunch of cruel twats. It was really kind of her to stand up to them. I always will remember that. I was once traveling through an old town, when I stopped at a small shop to buy some packaged water. I was in my tweens at that time, so I jumped out of my car, and went to buy. A very old man sat at the shop. Once I bought everything, he took out an ice cream, and handed it to me. As I was about to take the bottles with me, he picked the bottles himself and walked with me to the car so that I could have my ice cream. He was very old and scaly, very thin too. And once he saw that I had a younger sister, he rushed back to the shop to bring out another ice cream for her. I insisted that he take money for it. But he didn't take it and just smiled. Maybe we reminded him of his grandchildren, I presume. I was in Walmart one day, and some dude was blocking the aisle, where the item I needed was located. I then heard him ask a Walmart employee where the cabinet liners were. She proceeded to say she wasn't sure and started to send him to the wrong location. I nosily piped up, "I know where they are. If you want to follow me, I will take you to them, because I just bought some last week." The man, "Oh, okay. Thank you." He followed me to the opposite side of the store, and I showed him where they were. He thanked me again, and I hurried back to the other side of the store to get what I needed. 5 minutes later at the self-checkouts, the man showed up, and I saw him just hanging around with his bag of purchases on his arm. When it came time to pay, he stepped up and insisted on paying for my items. I thanked him profusely. At the time, I only had $35 in my bank account, and was trying to purchase food for the week. This man who I was so annoyed with helped me so much. I still tear up when I think of his kindness. I am a single mother of 2 wonderful kids, and this was my miracle. I moved 1,000 miles away from everything I knew after graduating college 16 years ago. Back then I was pretty homesick, struggling in my career and figuring things out, so I felt pretty lost in life. One day I was walking around downtown Orlando, when an older man probably in his mid-80s stopped me. He handed a piece of paper that he was carrying to me, and said, "You seem like a good person with a good heart. It will be all right." Then he just walked away. Looking down, that piece of paper was a copy of a handwritten page by him filled with dozens and dozens of sayings, illustrations, and quotes from all over the world regarding love and hope. Tears came immediately, and I put it away to read later that day. It stayed on my wall in my home for the better part of 10 years until I moved again. Now it's been 16 years since then, and sure, he's moved on to the next world by now. I still have that page, take it out occasionally, and think about that wonderful man from many years ago, who taught me about pure and genuine random acts of kindness right along with love and hope. He was an absolute blessing to me and to our world. Thank you, good sir. You were a beautiful soul. I'm sitting at a red light with my wife and son. I'm directly behind a yellow school bus full of kids. Some of the kids were just being kids and making faces out the window at cars, etc. A small group of kids were gathered near the back of the bus looking at us. All of a sudden, one kid does the Gangnam style, crossing the wrists and bobbing the hands up and down part. I do it right back to him, with a huge grin on my face. Then I do the part where you stick your arm up in the air and twirl it around while moving your head back and forth. By this time just about the entire bus was watching, and as the light turned green, the first heard them absolutely erupting with laughter. Best red light ever. The most wholesome and memorable experience was in a crowded New York airport with an elderly lady. I saw her crying and looking bewildered as she sat alone in the main concourse. So I sat down next to her and asked if I could help. She said she was going to a family member's funeral on the West Coast and had never been in an airport. The lady was hard of hearing, and the loudspeaker announcements just compounded her confusion to the point where she was physically trembling. At that point, as I once noted here in AskReddit, I guided her through security and directly to her gate, asking the attendants to give her special assistance, especially with her inability to discern broadcast announcements. As an attendant escorted her for boarding, the lady turned, waved, and blew a kiss in my direction. To this day, I can still picture her vividly. Went to a bar to meet a date, and got ghosted. So I'm sitting at the bar drinking alone, and saw a woman being harassed by a drunk guy. I intervened and she acted as if she'd been waiting for me. The drunk got lost and the woman and I sat together at the bar for a couple hours. We had a really great time, lots of smiles and laughs. There were sparks for sure. She asked for my phone and started talking selfies, so I took it back from her to get some better photos. Probably captured 50 or so, some really candid ones, and some silly poses. After we laughed about the photos, she got up to leave. I asked for her number, and if we could go out sometime, but she declined. She thanked me for the wonderful night, and said something along the lines of let's just leave it at this, and enjoy the memory. Somehow I felt okay with that. I kept her photos for several years, and every time I saw them they instantly brought a smile to my face. I never even knew her name, but it was one of the best dates of my life. Once went out to a restaurant for a meal. Earlier the same day we found out that one of my partner's relatives, someone they were close to, had killed themselves. We thought it would be a good idea to get out of the house and distract ourselves. Our waitress was lovely and spoke to us throughout the meal, as it was quiet, and she seemed fun. At the end of the meal, and many wines, my partner was visibly emotional, not crazy, just sad-looking. The waitress asked us if we were okay, and saw that my partner was upset, so she asked again. We told her what had happened. She was shocked, and it was obvious she really felt for my partner. A few minutes later, she came over with some limoncello shots, and said it's on the house, which was unexpected and lovely. We protested a bit, but she said I'm managing tonight. It's little things like this that make me like working here, because I can make your night a bit better. What a legend. It gets even more lovely though. We asked her for the bill shortly after, and when it arrived, it read £00. She had discounted the whole bill, putting it through as wastage. We were shocked and had a tearful goodbye with her after many protests, and finding it unbelievable. We'd had a 3-course meal, wine and beer, loads of sides. We went to town, and she just covered it, because my partner was sad. I'll remember it forever. She could have kept herself to herself and ignored us, but that moment of kindness meant too much to us that day, and turned it from a shitty day to a less shitty day. I was traveling from the south of England to the north of Scotland, to start a new job the next morning. I had taken a train up to London, and was supposed to get on an early morning flight from Heathrow. The bus to the airport, however, was cancelled, and I had to make my own way using a series of night buses. However, it was about 2:30 a.m. and my phone was dead, and I had never used London's night buses before. I was young and a little scared, standing in the middle of Victoria trying to figure out the fated bus schedule, when a middle-aged woman came up to me and asked, "Are you all right, love?" And I explained through tears that I thought I was going to miss my flight, and didn't even have an Oyster card. She looked up my route on her phone, wrote down all the possible variations of buses and trains that I would need to take, including the times. Then when the bus came up, she paid for my fare. No cash on London buses. I got out and looked to her, and she shrugged and said, "Oh, I'm not getting the bus. You just looked like you needed someone." I think about her every once in a while, and I'm incredibly grateful for her. About 10 years ago, me and my sister, as young adults, had a little girl on the bus to Disneyland sign something, and take a picture with us, because we needed a signature from a real princess on our trip to make all of our friends at home jealous. I thought little one was going to die of excitement. She was so cute. But once we got done with our autograph, she lectured us saying, "You know, you two could be princesses too. You're nice and you are at Disneyland, you just need a crown." We were fresh out, so she conducted our coronations right then and there, smiley face. "I'll have you all know that I am Princess Gardenia __Guardian, Louisa said so." Also, her parents were so fucking nice, they tried to buy us lunch afterward. It just warms my heart thinking about. I hope she's still growing up happy and sweet.